Hey everyone, this is Justin from Who Is Like You Ministries and welcome back to another video. Now I know I haven't uploaded in a while, I've been super busy and actually I've been writing articles on a blog, not instead of the YouTube, but I do it more frequently than the YouTube just because it takes less time and I don't have to edit for 3 or 4 hours. So I'll go ahead and put a link down to that in the description because I am more active on that blog, but I'm still going to upload YouTube videos, and this is one that I have been working on for a while, and it is the New Testament reliable? So let's go ahead and get started. So, what are we dealing with? Atheistic naturalistic materialism virtually controls the entire academic world today. Anything that doesn't fit their view of the world or that contradicts it is rejected almost 100% of the time. Christian claims and beliefs are currently under extreme attack and face extreme discrimination in the scholarly community and in regular society. Many New Testament scholars are either ignorant of the topic of the New Testament manuscripts or are dishonestly spinning the evidence to disprove Christianity. If you talk to any opponent of Christianity, they will claim that what we call the New Testament today is just copies upon copies upon copies of ancient writings. And sometimes many Christians even claim this. But is that the case? Here are the facts and the truth. So before I tell you about the variants, let me tell you about the New Testament itself. There are 138,162 words in the New Testament, and some scholars say 167. Of those words, we have 400,000 variants. That's nearly 3 variants per word. Because of this, Christians are told that we can never be sure that what we have today accurately reflects what was written by the original authors. Now, with just this knowledge, there is no way anyone would believe that the New Testament is even remotely reliable. But that's not the whole story. And as we can see here on the graph, we have the number of words in the New Testament compared to the amount of variants there are. 99% of all variants do not impact the meaning of the text. Variations in spelling and word order make up the vast majority of variations. 1% of 400,000 equals 4,000 meaningful textual variants out of 138,162 words, 2.9%, or 1 meaningful variant every 3 pages. But only half of these are actually viable. That means there are 1,500 to 2,000 viable, meaningful New Testament textual variants. And here is a new graph with the number of meaningful variants compared to the number of words in the New Testament. The more manuscripts you have for a particular work, the more textual variants you will have. There are 5,780 cataloged manuscripts of the New Testament books. And now that I think of it, I think we've actually discovered a few more and we're closer to the 6,000 number. But anyway, the average of those manuscripts is about 200 pages long. That is approximately 1.3 million pages of text. 1,500 to 2,000 meaningful and viable variants over 1.3 million pages of hand-copied text spanning approximately 1,500 years prior to the invention of the printing press is an extremely small percentage of the text, reflecting an extremely accurate history of transmission. To even further cement the fact that the New Testament is reliable, let's take a look at the manuscript attestation for other works of antiquity. Now we see here we have Livy. He was one of the 3 great Roman historians and wrote a history of Rome. The oldest manuscript we possess for him is from the 4th century AD, and he has 27 surviving manuscripts. And the time between writing and discovery of his oldest manuscript is about 300 years. Tacitus, who was around AD 56 to 120. He's been called the greatest historian and wrote many things like Germania, the Histories, and the Annals. His oldest manuscript that we have is from the 9th century AD. He has 3 surviving manuscripts, and the time between writing and discovery of his oldest manuscript is about 700 years. Suetonius, living around AD 69 to 140, was a Roman biographer and antiquarian. His oldest manuscript is 9th century AD, and he has 200 surviving manuscripts. And the time between his writing and the discovery of his oldest manuscript is 700 years. Now, he is in second place for the most amount of surviving manuscripts from the secular world. Thucydides, who lived between 460 and 400 BC, was one of the greatest ancient Greek historians and wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War. His oldest manuscript is from the 1st century AD, and he has 20 surviving manuscripts, and he has about 600 years between the time of writing and the discovery of the oldest manuscript. Herodotus, which many of you have probably heard of, who lived between 484 and 425 BC, was also an ancient Greek historian and wrote the history of the Greco-Persian War. His oldest manuscript also comes from the 1st century AD. He has 75 surviving manuscripts, and the time between his writing and the discovery of his oldest manuscript is 600 years. Homer, who lived between the 8th and 9th century BC, who is probably the most famous of all of the ancient writers, he has the most number of surviving manuscripts of anyone in the ancient world. His oldest manuscript that we have is from the 1st century AD. He has 643 surviving manuscripts, and the time between writing and discovery of his oldest manuscript is 1,000 years. And now we come to the New Testament. Our oldest manuscripts are around circa 100 to 150 AD. There are more than 5,700 surviving manuscripts of the New Testament, and that number is just counting Greek manuscripts. We also have over 10,000 Latin manuscripts and over 1 million quotations from church fathers. The time between writing and the discovery of the oldest manuscripts for the New Testament is about 35 years. The oldest surviving manuscript that I'll show you later was written in AD 125, and it is of the Gospel of John. John is thought to have been completed around AD 90 or 100. This means that the earliest manuscript we have is around 35 years after the original writing. That is amazing. This would be from the 1st or 2nd transmission generation. Quite a different picture. Now, to quote F.F. Bruce, a renowned textual scholar, no classical scholar would listen to an argument that the authenticity of Herodotus or Thucydides is in doubt because of the earliest manuscripts of their work, which are of any use to us over 1,300 years later than the originals. But even the 1,500 to 2,000 number that I mentioned earlier needs to be understood. Even when the variant does impact the reading, in the large majority of instances, scholars can see which reading is original. Many of these errors involve common scribal errors, mistakes that we continue to make to this very day when copying from one text to another. Here is an important example from the history of the New Testament. 1 John 3:1. Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. And that's from the King James Version. And now let's look at it from the New American Standard Bible. 1 John 3:1. See now how great a love the Father has bestowed on us, that we would be called children of God. And such we are. For this reason the world does not know us, because it did not know him. As we can see, the red text, and such we are, is absent from the King James Version. The modern texts contain an important phrase affirming our adoption as children of God through Christ that is not found in the King James Version. Why? Because the Greek text from which the King James Version was translated lacked the phrase. But why? This is an example of what is called homoiteleuton, or homoiarchton. These are Latin phrases meaning similar endings or similar beginnings. How many times have you been copying a word ending with such combinations as ing, tion, or es, when looking back at what you're copying, have mistakenly copied different words that had the same ending? Now here we have 1 John 3:1 from the Nestle Aland 28th edition of the Greek New Testament. Kai esmen, and we are. If you look at the text on the bottom right side, those are the manuscripts that do not contain the phrase. KL and 049, these are unsealed manuscripts. The Fraktur M that you see means majority text, and Fraktur is a German type of lettering. So the Fraktur M means the majority text, and it also means that the majority of Greek texts do not contain the phrase, and such we are. But what it also means is that the vast majority of early Greek texts do contain the phrase. But that doesn't really help you understand why there is a scribal error here. Ancient writers made the same error. Here is the relevant portion of the Greek as it would have appeared in unsealed text in the early days of the New Testament. This is from Codex Vaticanus, a majuscule text from the 4th century. This is from Codex Sinaiticus, a text that is also from the 4th century. This is from Codex Alexandrinus, and this one is from the 5th century. So here we have kleithomen, that we might be called, and kai esmen, and we are. As you can see in red, the mu epsilon nu, or men, is in the ending of both words. So the transcriber may have written the first word and then looked back at the manuscript and only looked for the men and saw it in the second word, so he just started from there and didn't notice that he skipped a word. Other examples of errors by scribes are dittography and itacism. Dittography is when a scribe jumps from the second group of letters to the first group and writes down those letters from the first group into the newly copied second group. This means that letters were written twice. Itacism is when a scribe gets confused with letters that are pronounced alike. These errors can happen for many reasons, but most likely are because the scribe is fatigued, interrupted, or has bad eyesight. Sometimes, scribes would intentionally try to smooth out grammatical or stylistic hardness, or to eliminate real or imagined obscurities of meaning in the text. Occasionally, a copyist would substitute or add what he thought was a more appropriate word or form. This could be from a parallel passage, and when this happens, it is called harmonization or assimilation.